Thank you very much. May we have the lights on again, the house lights? I need to see you because, again, we are going to have some interaction. And I think it's very important that we have a partner to interact with. And so in this session, you're going to be very much involved in thinking through some thinking and to work with another person doing it. So today we're going to talk about metacognition. I mentioned this in my keynote speech, and I'd like to go more deeply into it and give you some practice in skills of helping your students think about their thinking. So we're going to talk about metacognition, and what we mean by that is that we become aware of and we take charge of our own thoughts and feelings and actions and their effects on others. So it's not only what we are thinking, but what effect am I having on other people? So I become aware of my actions and how they affect others and the environment. Now, probably one of our best definitions of metacognition is from our good friend Dennis, the Menace. And Dennis, of course, says thinking is when your mouth stays shut and your head keeps talking to itself. And so that's inner dialogue that we have inside our head. And that's basically what metacognition is all about. But what we want in school is for students to become aware of what's going on inside their head. We want them to be spectators of their own thought processes. So it means looking inside your mind to see what's going on there. So it's like standing on a balcony and looking inside your head. It's standing outside of your head but looking into it. Paying attention to the pictures and the dialogue and the thoughts and the questions and the emotions and the experiences and the feelings that you are having inside your body. So metacognition also means seeing into someone else's mind and trying to see from their point of view. And so being able to make an inference about other people's thoughts and picking up cues from them about what and how they're thinking. For example, now here's your first task, and you're going to need to be sitting next to a person so that you can have this dialogue. So at this time, again, would you please find a person that you can sit next to, and as I said the other day, hopefully that person looks at least as intelligent as you do. So if you are sitting by yourself, please scoot yourself over and find a person that you can interact with, and we're going to be working together. Good, thank you. Find out who that person is, get to know them. And here's what I'd like you to do. We're talking about seeing into someone else's mind and trying to see from their point of view. So here are pictures of two people. What do you think is going on inside the head of this woman? And what do you think is going on inside the head of that man? Tell your partner, please, what is it that you think is going on inside their head from just viewing their face? All right, if you would look this way again. Now, notice what you are doing. You are looking at the posture, the hand placement, the eyes, the mouth, and these all are cues to you from which you make inferences inside your head about what this other person is thinking. So that you might think that that young lady is deep in thought. She might be studying, she might be contemplating, and she's got her hand up to her mouth with a pencil. So she's taking notes. Maybe she's studying something and envisioning inside her head. And this young man looks like he's getting ready for a date tonight. And he's having a picture of his girlfriend. You think so? Anyhow, that ability to observe others and make inferences in our head about what's going on inside their head is something that is uniquely human. As far as we know, not many other animals can have that ability. Although we do know that in chimpanzees that we are able to, they are able to imitate their parents, their mother, and the other chimpanzees around them. However, we don't know if they're able to think about it. We see them doing it, but if they're thinking about it, we don't know yet. What's also very interesting is that not all children or adults metacogitate. Now, that might be somewhat unbelievable to you, because if you have gone through school, you cannot get through school without learning how to think about your thinking. However, just because you do it does not mean that everybody does it. In fact, it has been found that only about 40% of the adults in the world, that's the worldwide population, are able to think about their own thinking. And that's kind of what is startling. And so metacognitive skills don't come naturally. They must be cultivated. So this is not something that you are born with, but rather the capacity for it is you're born with, but the ability to do it needs to be learned. And developing metacognitive capacities requires the guidance of a skillful mediator, and that's where you come in as a teacher. And so it's very important then that we learn how to help children learn how to think about their thinking. And the reason why is that if children gain better knowledge and understanding and regulation of their own cognitive processes, it will improve their learning process. Understanding why and how they think in particular helps them learn better. And so it's very important then that we help children to take charge of and to monitor and to be aware of their own thought processes. And so basically, what metacognition is like an internal compass inside our brain. And metacognition is like an executive center. It is the director of all the other thinking processes and dispositions and habits of mind. It's the control center. And what's interesting is that we can learn how to control those thought processes. It's called auto-regulation. And so we want students then to become aware of and to learn how to control their thought processes inside their head. So when we talk about metacognition, we talk about, and we understand what that is. For example, do any of you ever talk to yourself? Come on now, be honest. Yes. Do you ever ask yourself questions? Okay, that's part of it. When you get ready to teach a lesson, for example, or to plan an event, do you ever think through what will make that lesson successful or what will make that event fun or complete? Notice that you engage in inner coaching. We go through mental rehearsal, and I put a picture of a diver up there. And the reason why I put the picture of the Olympic diver is because it has been found that when Olympic scale divers, these are the really good ones, get on that diving board, and just before they dive off the diving board, they rehearse inside their head. They see their body moving with style and grace and precision off the end of that diving board. They envision what their body is going to do. And what they find is that the mental processes actually go through a rehearsal. In other words, the brain sends impulses to the nerves and the musculature prior to performance, which improves and increases their performance. Do you all know the tune to Happy Birthday or Cumpleaños? Don't sing it out loud. Hear it inside your head. Can you hear it? It's what we call audiation. It's inner humming. So many of us play a tune inside our heads and we audiate. That's part of metacognition. Here is a cartoon. Do you know Blondie? Blondie says, honey, do you hear, did I just hear you talking to yourself a few minutes ago? And Dagwood says, what? Of course not. Don't be silly. Oh, take it easy, dear. It isn't a big deal, you know. And Dagwood says, oh, man, I can't believe she thinks I talk to myself. And, of course, what's he doing? Talking to himself. And so we have an inner dialogue. Yesterday I showed you a picture of this man who's yawning while he is marching. And we find that each of us have differences in styles. And what do you know about yourself as a thinker is affecting your thinking. For example, how many of you are morning people? You do your best work in the morning. How many of you are evening people? You do your best in the evening. How many of you kind of do the best around noontime? Or maybe just before you're taking a siesta. And so we have a time of day that works best for us. Some of us are analyzers and some of us are synthesizers. We see the big picture, or some of us see the details, one or the other, or sometimes both. Some people are random and some people are sequential. How many of you like to work where it's very quiet? You have to have okay, so that's some of you. Others have to have the radio on or have the television on in order to study. Some of you need to chew or eat while you're studying. How many of you like to work by yourself? How many of you would prefer to work in a group? We have styles. How many of you know your modality preference? And this is what we can remember is GOTCAB, and I'll tell you what that stands for. G stands for gustatory. These are people who like to chew gum, like to chew on carrots while they're learning. O is olfactory. T is for tactile, feeling. K is for kinesthetic. You have to be moving. A is auditory, and V is visual. And so many of us have a preferred learning style. And when you know that, when you know what your learning style is, you can choose to surround yourself with those resources that help that learning style. For example, if you are a gustatory learner, you go make yourself a sandwich in order to sit down and read your book. If you are a tactile learner, you follow in a book the lines as you're going across it. If you are a visual learner, you stop reading and you make a mental picture of it. And so you know how to enhance your learning depending upon whatever learning style you had. I ran across this the other day and I thought it was so funny because we now have a smartphone that instead of ringing, it produces smells, fragrances. And you can get aromas of rose, mint, cinnamon, coffee, curry, jasmine, lavender, or even a limited edition of a Korean barbecue. And so when the phone it doesn't ring, it emits a fragrance. That's for people who are the olfactory learners. Sometimes inside our head, we have mnemonics. For example, when I was going to school, I learned a rule of how to spell receive. And that was always I before E except after C. Did you learn something like that? Or, where are our folks from Australia? Anybody from Australia? Do you know about Pam should be here, dear? Well, I'll tell you what that is. Do you know the capitals of the states of Australia? If you will remember Pam should be here, dear, you will remember the names of the states. Perth, Adelaide, Melbourne, Pam, Sydney, Brisbane, Hobart, Darwin. Now that's the most important thing that you'll learn in this whole conference. But that's what we mean by a mnemonic, and that's one of those tools that David was talking about the other day of ways that we can remember, or hooks that we can have for our mind. Such things as thinking maps or charts, for example, that remind us about ways of thinking, such as brainstorming, such as classifying, such as being able to think about what the frame is or what the big idea is. All of those are ways of turning on the mind. When we know those strategies, we can allocate time. For example, you say, I'm going to study for a test, and I need to know how to allocate my time for it. I like to underline, so I'm going to get out my felt pen. I'm going to do it early in the morning when I'm full of energy, and I do it best when I'm sitting up straight or at the dining room table rather than lying down in bed, because I fall asleep if I do that. I like to have a bright room. I like to have sharpened pencils when I'm writing. And so knowing about yourself, you can allocate your own resources. You can also monitor what's going on inside your head. What do I need to change? What are my plans for finding out? How well is my plan working? So I'm monitoring that plan as I'm going along. Where am I in that plan? Do I understand what I'm reading? If not, what do I do about it? So these are all internal questions that you're asking yourself that are of a metacognitive nature. And so in schools, we want to make metacognition a very explicit goal. I want my students to use the language of metacognition to think about their own questions, to think about the questions inside their head, to be able to talk aloud about their problem solving. And I'm going to have to probe them and clarify the thinking processes. And when they do use metacognitive thinking, I want to reinforce it and recognize it. And I want them to reflect on their thinking processes. And so today, this is what I'm going to engage you in, is a little metacognitive process. Now, for example, let me give you a little problem, and I want you to turn to your neighbor and tell your neighbor how you are solving that problem. Are you ready for your problem? Here it is. How much is 1/2 of 2 plus 2? Turn to your neighbor. Talk to your neighbor about not only what the answer is, but also what you're doing to figure it out. All right. How many of you heard yourself say to yourself, okay, 1/2 of 2 is 1, plus 2 is 3, so the answer is 3. How many of you said that? How many of you said, wait a minute, 1/2 of the sum of 2 plus 2 is 2, plus 2 is 4. Which one is right? How do you know? Notice that you have alternatives, you have different ways of thinking about it, and the teacher's job is not to say, yes, you're right or wrong, but rather to draw out the thinking processes. What we want students to do is to become aware of the thought processes and the strategies that they're using, and to be able to verbalize them. And this is something that we call TAPS, or Think Aloud Problem Solving. Now, I'm going to show you a little video clip. It's an animation, and it is about helping kids learn how to think about their thinking. I hope I can get it going here. Oh, okay, go. Let's see, is that working? Not yet. Well, now, notice I'm having a problem, so we've got to solve it here.
It's great you came to play with us today, Marcus. We really needed another player.
Well, I've never played baseball before, but how hard can it be? All you do is hit the ball, right?
Well, yes, but there's a lot more to it than that.
Really?
If you walked up and just hit the ball, it could go anywhere, including right to the other team. And then you'd be out.
You have to think about your thinking and plan out a strategy for where you want the ball to go.
Think about my thinking? That doesn't make any sense.
It sounds funny, but it actually works. When you think about your thinking, you focus on what you're doing and how you can do it better, rather than just doing it without thinking.
Yeah, it helps to have a strategy in your mind so you can reach your goal.
Okay, Marcus, you're up.
Just think about your thinking.
Good luck!
Think about my thinking. If I hit it to him, I'll be out. If I hit it that way, he could catch it. There. If I hit the ball hard enough that way, I bet that would work.
Great hit, Marcus! Now run!
Yeah, awesome hit, Marcus.
Hey, I think I did pretty well. That was a lot of fun, guys. Thanks again for asking me to play.
You did great, Marcus!
Thinking about your thinking made playing t-ball easier, didn't it?
It really did. I slowed down, planned a strategy, and focused. And when I focused, I could see right where I needed to hit the ball. And it worked.
Yep. I think about my thinking when I read something new.
When reading? Why?
Well, after I read something, I think about my thinking and ask myself, do I really understand what I just read? If I don't, I go back and reread it and make sure I get it.
I like that. I think I'll do that too.
Well, right now I'm thinking about where to go to celebrate! Woohoo! Victory is ours!
I think I'll think about that too.
So that's one way of introducing, let me get back here. Of introducing students to the notion of no, we don't want to see it again. Sorry. Introducing the students to the notion of thinking about your own thinking, because this will be new to them. Many have never been asked to think about their thinking before, so like you have to introduce it to them and teach them the whole process. One way that we do this is through a method called TAPS. And we did one of these yesterday in the keynote, but I'd like to return to that. And so when we do TAPS, it's called Think Aloud Problem Solving. And what we want to do is to have our students then reveal what's going on inside their head as they are solving a problem. And so what we do then is to invite students to describe their plans and strategies for solving a problem. We give them a problem to solve and then ask them to talk about it. We ask them to share their thinking as they are implementing their plan. So what's going on in your head right now? Where did you start? Where are you in your plan of action right now? How do you know you're right? And then to reflect on and evaluate the effectiveness of their strategy. Sometimes kids resist doing this. Here's a young man who, when the teacher asks him, "Can you explain how you came up with that answer?" Kid says, "No, I think it was just divine intervention." So, here's what we want to do. I'm going to give you some questions, and again, I'm going to ask you to share with each other, one of you being a teacher and one of you being a student problem solver. And the teacher, here are some of your strategies. You might ask such questions as, how do you know you're right? That's a very powerful question. How do you know you're right? What other ways can you prove that you are correct? And in order to do this, you have to go back into your thinking process. Explain to me what you mean when you said you just figured it out. Sometimes kids will say, I don't know, I just figured it out. Well, how did you just figure it out? When you said you started at the beginning, how did you know where to start? I think you heard me wrong. Let me repeat the question. And you need to check your addition. Remember, you're not providing answers. You do not say, yes, you're right, or no, you're wrong, because what would happen if you were in the middle of a problem and you said to the kid, no, your answer's wrong? Stops thinking. Or also if you say, yes, your answer is correct, stops thinking. And so we want to keep the thinking process going. So we want to say, student, tell me what strategies you're using to solve that problem. And sometimes your kids say, I hate these kind of problems, I don't like these kind of problems, I don't do these kind of problems. And you say, come on, hang in there, you can do it. So when you play your role as a teacher, here are some questions that you want to ask. You check for accuracy. How do you know you're right? Explain to me how you solved the problem. Provide data, not answers. Don't give the kid the right answer. Resist making value judgments like good for you, or yes, you're right, or no, you're wrong. Stay focused on the thinking and continue to encourage persistence. So you two are going to work together with a very good friend. And let me tell you why I say that, is because a friend is one before whom I may think aloud, according to Ralph Waldo Emerson. So we're going to start easy, and the problems get a little bit more complex as we go on. So here is a problem that we often use in literature. You're teaching students to compose sentences and paragraphs. And sometimes along about 4th or 5th year, your students write, but they go on and on and on and on. And then the boy, and then the dog, and then the man, and then the girl. And so what I want them to do is learn how to combine sentences. So would one of you choose to be the student? And we're going to do this several times. So would one of you choose to be the student? And one of you choose to be the teacher? Would you decide on that for your first problem? You're all going to get problems, so it'll be a matter of switching back and forth. So whoever is our first teacher, you ask those kind of questions and listen to your students' thinking. And whoever is the first student, here is your first problem. There are 4 sentences here, and you have to combine these sentences into one sentence that incorporates all the thoughts. So the horse jumped over the fence, the horse was gray, the jump was done gracefully, and the fence was low and made of brick. You have to combine it in one succinct sentence. So would you do that, but would you tell your teacher what's going on inside your head as you're solving this problem? Turn to your teacher and talk out loud. All right, if you would look this way, please. Now, I want to focus on the teachers for a moment. How many of you, as teachers, found yourself saying something like, "Yes, that's right, good for you"? Nobody. Good for you. Because I don't want you to make value judgments. As soon as you say, "Yes, you're right, good for you," the thinking stops. And so the intent is not to commend the student for a right answer, but rather to encourage the continuation of thinking. And you will be a successful teacher of metacognition if you can continue to engage the thought process even after the student has come to the answer that they think is right. Now let me turn to the students for a moment. For how many of you did your teacher's interaction cause you to rethink and to change your answer? Good for you. Where is your teacher? Teacher, I want you to do something. If you got your student to think about their thinking, I want you to put the elbow of your right arm in the hand of your left arm. Would you do that, please? Now pat yourself on the back. That's what we want. But we are not through, because I want us now to switch roles, and whoever was the student now becomes the teacher, and whoever was the teacher now becomes the student, because I have another problem for you. And by the way, the problems become a little bit more complex as we go along. So here is your problem. There are 4 people in line. Sarah is between Barry and Mary. Mary is in front of 2 people, and John is directly in front of Mary. Who's first in line? Second, third, and fourth. Now, if you want to use paper and pencil, you may do that on this problem, but that will not be available for you for all problems. And so, whoever is the student now, would you please talk out loud to your teacher about what's going on inside your head to solve this problem? All right. Now again, those of you who were teachers, how many of you were tempted to tell your student that they had the right answer? All right? I want you to resist that temptation, because if you tell them they have the right answer, what will happen to their thinking? Terminó. It is over. And so we want the thinking to continue. So your job is not to commit the right answer or say good for you, but rather your job is to continue the thinking process. Now, here's a very interesting challenge for you, and we're going to switch roles again, so we're going to have a new student and a new teacher. And teacher, whoever is the new teacher, I would like you, well, let me ask you another question. How many of you found that in this one, those of you who were teachers also solved the problem along with the student? Okay? I would like you to resist doing that. And you know why you are solving the problem? As teachers, we solve the problem along with the students so that we can confirm that their answer is correct. Metacognition is not a right answer process. Metacognition is a mental process. And so I want you to try to resist, teachers, resist figuring out the answer. Let your student figure out the answer. And would you please use your energies to listen to your students rather than figuring out the answer to the problem along with your students. That's going to be hard because we are so used to confirming whether the answer is correct or not. So resist that temptation to give the right answer or to confirm the right answer, but instead listen to how your student is solving the problem. So students, I'm going to give you this problem, and you will come up with an answer, but your teacher will want to ask you, how did you solve that problem? What was going on inside your head to solve that problem? Are there any other ways to solve that problem? How do you know you're correct? Okay? So as teachers and students, we have a new teacher now and a new student, and here is your next problem. Your problem is to find the number that best completes this sequence of numbers. Students, see if you can figure that out. And talk to your teacher. All right. Teachers, those who are the teachers, how was it for you to resist inserting the answer? This is very hard for us because we are so right answer oriented. We want our students to know the right answer. So in order to carry on a metacognitive discussion, you have to withhold the right answer to cause the students to continue to think. So asking questions like, how did you know how to do that? Where did you begin? How do you know you're right? What other ways are there to think about that problem? See, all of those are strategies and techniques that you can use as a teacher to keep the thinking process going. So it means that we have to withhold right answers in order to get our students to learn how to think. And that's hard for us as teachers because we've been taught for years that we want our students to know right answers. And of course we want our students to know right answers. And I'll tell you something, your kids are going to ask you, aren't you going to tell us the right answer? And you say, no. I've had students who come back to me days, weeks later, and they say, you know, I've still been thinking about that problem. And that's exactly what we want. It's good for you. You've continued to think. You've persisted because that's the behavior that we want. That thinking doesn't come to an end, but thinking is ongoing. And so students try other ways of solving the problem. They try to develop other kinds of strategies. All right, here's another sequence problem. So switch roles again, new teacher, new student. And again, teacher now, the new teacher, please do not give your energies to solving the problem. Listen to your student. Give your energy, your mind over to listening to how your student is solving the problem. So student, please talk out loud to your teacher about what's going on inside your head to figure out the next letter in this sequence. All right. Now, the whole intent of this was to help students feel comfortable in verbalizing their thought processes out loud to another person. So in a classroom, what we want to hear is discussion about the thinking process. And in order to keep that thinking process going and to create an environment, the teacher needs to learn how, you as teachers need to learn how to engage the mind and to clarify the thinking. I would also suggest to you that you teach students how to do this with each other. Because sometimes the student will say, what's the answer to number 3? And your friend will give them answer. That is not helping them. Instead of giving the answer, they need to learn how to think about the process. The reason why is because if students do not know the process that produces the answer, they cannot reproduce the answer. So you have to engage in the process of thinking in order to produce the thinking. And so we have to make a classroom a place where thinking out loud is common, where students understand how to do it, where teachers encourage it. It's a culture of thinking in the classroom. And so I want you to practice these, and I want you to have the students practice them as well. So let me give you one more problem. And this time, whoever, I've forgotten now whose turn it is to be the teacher, but whoever was the teacher now becomes the student again. Whoever was the student now becomes the teacher. And here is the problem. Bonnie's father has 5 daughters. 4 are named Chacha, Cheche, Chichi, and Chocho. What is the 5th daughter's name? Would you turn to your partner, please? Talk about what's going on inside your head to solve this problem. All right, if you would look this way again. Now, in such a large room, it is very difficult to have interaction with you. But I would like one person to volunteer to talk out loud about what was going on inside their head to solve this problem. Who would volunteer? Pardon? You've heard it before, okay. Someone else who would share out loud with us how they solved this problem. Okay, here we go. Back here with your hand up. Arriba. Very loud voice so we can hear you. Okay. Okay, and tell us how you solved the problem. ¿Cómo se llama de la hija? Bonnie. All right, thank you. All right, so the whole intent of this session now is to cause our students then to be spectators of their own thinking. And so you as a teacher must resist giving answers and instead encouraging the thinking processes. You must also have a range of problems, the answers to which are somewhat controversial, so that there are several ways of solving the problem. But the intent, the long-range intent, is for children to take charge of their own thinking, because this is a very unique human capacity, is for us to monitor, to become spectators of, and to modify our own thinking processes, to become aware of what's going on inside our head. And this gives rise then to self-regulation and self-control, and that's what we want in our students. It gives rise to self-directedness, because students modify their own thinking. So it's up to you as teachers then to cause our students to become thinkers and to monitor what's going on inside their head. So please go forth now and make thinking happen. Buena suerte.